There's this song I say back in the day, and it keeps coming back to me. He said, my father said there's more politics in the music industry than in the parliament. Then I tell myself, forgive them, father. They don't know what they deal with. Sometimes I also forgive myself because I didn't know what I was dealing with, but I'm learning with time.
For many people, muyinza ogamba nti Bobi Wine amazina g'enkima gatandise omufuukira ekizibu naye si bwe kiri. It's normal for a politician to break down. It's normal for a politician okuvaayo n'agamba nkooye. When Bobi Wine says he once felt like quitting, it's not a sign of weakness, but it's a mark of every leader who carries a heavy movement on their shoulders. And the truth is, leaders don't quit when they stop believing in themselves. They quit when the pressure becomes heavier than their humanity. Yet, the greatest among them stays because the cause is bigger than their pain. This is the update here on the Board Network. My name is Francis. Welcome aboard. Now, the National Unity Platform has launched a podcast platform upon which they are going to be hosting several people, I assume from within the National Unity Platform, specifically political actors. And also, I think it will be a platform where they will be easily able to tell their own stories of struggle, but also, I think, to interview people that have been either oppressed by the regime or have achieved certain milestones within the party. As the first guest of the podcast, the National Unity Platform podcast, is obviously none other than Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, also known as Bobi Wine, and of course, arguably the strongest opposition leader running against President Museveni for the 2026 presidential election. And of course, on this first episode of the podcast, a lot of things were touched on his experience since he came into active politics, what his thoughts are in regards to the arrests that were made against that were made upon members of National Unity Platform. Spoke on Olivia Lutaya, and his general perspective of what the political environment is like for him, being a National Unity Platform or a member of the opposition who's running against a regime that has been in power for over 40 years now. For me, the highlight of the entire conversation was when Bobi Wine actually acknowledged that at some point in life of his or engaging in active politics, it's actually been challenging to the point that he wanted to quit politics. Let's dive into the video and then I'll share a few things about what I think.
I think sometimes when people decide to take on the challenge to change the fate of their lives, for example, you offer yourself to lead the struggle, I think in where I sit, I start to think people start to get entitled. Bobi Wine must do this. He must do that. Why isn't he talking about this? Why isn't he doing that? And yet, like you've already said, everyone has a role to play. If Bobi Wine isn't doing it, you do it. After all, it's not a job description that Bobi Wine must wake up every day to do this and that. Where you sit, I want to understand what goes on in your head when you see this criticism.
I'll tell you that one thing that I've learned to do this revolutionary work, you must disabuse yourself of emotions and sentiments. But again, you must also be willing to understand the people from a forgiving perspective. There's this song I say back in the day, and it keeps coming back to me. He said, my father said there's more politics in the music industry than in the parliament. Then I tell myself, forgive them, father. They don't know what they deal with. Sometimes I also forgive myself because I didn't know what I was dealing with, but I'm learning with time that you have to disabuse yourself of emotion. You have to understand people and forgive them. For example, my family itself, I had to understand them because to some people, to my family, I'm Tata. my immediate family. To my extended family, I'm just a young brother. I'm number 20. I think I'm number 20 or 25 among my father's children. So coming from such a family, there are some expectations. Now, coming also to politics, given the background where I come from, there's some of the politicians that believe that maybe it should be them where I'm standing, to take the honor but not to take the responsibility and the pain. They want to go to heaven but they don't want to die.
Bobi Wine is obviously being vulnerable, but also coming to terms with the realities of being in active politics, that people will expect a lot from you, but also your family will expect a lot from you, especially based off of what you promised. And that usually happens with a population of people that have grown tired of one thing that is not creating change or giving them the expectations that are often promised. So when one person comes with a promise of change, they expect that change to be expeditious, especially when that person also promises that that change will be expedited. So when you do not deliver, because if you notice very much in 2021, people were sure that Bobi Wine was bringing the change that they need. And now when he didn't bring the change, I think people's expectations were dealt a fatal blow, that they lost hope. When Bobi Wine did not bring the change they expected, they kind of like lost hope. And now that loss of hope weighed down on Bobi Wine. And that's what he's talking about. His family as well has certain expectations of him as a father, and his electorate or supporters also have expectations of him as a leader. For many people, muyinza ogamba nti Bobi Wine amazina g'enkima gatandise omufuukira ekizibu, naye si bwe kiri. It's normal for a politician to break down. It's normal for a politician okuvayo n'agamba nkooye ebyobufuzi njagala bivamu, because Bobi Wine is not an exception of politicians that have come out over time to say banaye kino ekintu njagala kivamu, because people have done it. Take for example Nelson Mandela himself, shortly after being released from prison in 1999. When he came, the ANC had a lot of struggles in it. There were ANC party members that were in the diaspora, and there were those that were in South Africa. Those in South Africa felt that the people in South Africa, those that like the members that were in the diaspora, were a little bit detached from those that were on ground, and it brought some bit of friction. And additionally, on top of that, that those that felt like the ANC was becoming more of a machine than something that could easily be relatable, or something, or a setup or a political party that was meant for the people, and now it had just turned into something that is careeristic, kind of people that had made it look like a job and are working for their own interests. And on top of that, actually, Nelson Mandela, being someone that wants to think and be inclusive, they created a situation whereby they managed to bring a bit of inclusion, whereby they brought people from the grassroots, people that were in the diaspora, and those that were also leading the party to come together and work together. But even then, things did not really work out. There are rifts within the party until it came to a point that Nelson Mandela had to create another faction that specifically served the interests of the people at the grassroots. But again, that again brought problems. And on top of that, there were international expectations for Nelson Mandela to be able to work towards ensuring that the people that were running the apartheid regime were pardoned, that is one, or two, a situation or an environment was created to ensure that people that were working in the apartheid government, Those were the white chaps. And those that were the oppressors and the oppressed, that is to say, had to work together. So there was that anticipation from the international community of what next is Nelson Mandela going to do. There were very many expectations of Nelson Mandela from the local, from South Africans and from the international community. So it is reported that actually at one time, because of such pressures, Nelson Mandela just wanted to retire, live a normal life and become a teacher. Come to East Africa. Raila Odinga, who was arguably the biggest opposition leader in Kenya. This man reached a point and said, you know what, I think I'm tired, because there were several times he won the election and it was rigged. And then there were also state intimidation and arrest of supporters that created emotional strain. He survived political betrayal after betrayal, even from his own allies. And at one point, he said he was tired of the struggle and tired of fighting. But every time he tried to step away, a new crisis pulled him back. And from Raila's story, you learn that it mirrors what many opposition leaders face in Africa. The exhaustion from fighting an entrenched system versus the emotions that they face as normal human beings. And that's why Bobi Wine says that for you to lead, you almost have to disabuse yourself from emotions. That there are times that will come when your emotions or your body or your head is telling you, I'm tired. But then the cause has to remind you to push on. That's what Bobi Wine was talking about. Because now when he looks at instances, actually he also added that people like Olivia Lutaya and other people that are even not known in this country are the reason why sometimes he pushes on and says, you know what, I need to go on. Because they come off stronger than him himself. Because sometimes he's weak, but he finds the strength in these people to move on, because the cause is much more important than emotions. There are leaders that have actually fallen under the weight of the emotional fatigue, and that is Julius Nyerere of Tanzania. Julius Nyerere, I think, in my opinion and from the little I've read, that Ujamaa nationalism system is actually that led to his downfall. The system was more like socialist, that was aimed at nationalizing everything and putting it in the hands of the people. Public ownership, that is to say, where land was owned by the public. The public had a collective effort in building the nation. And in one of the approaches of this system, it required that people move from their villages to come to these Ujamaa villages and create communities where they would live together, coexist together, build communities together, economic empowerment, and do things that build the nations together. But then this system actually faced a challenge whereby people were forced to move from their homes that most of them had grown up to these communities, the Ujamaa villages, that they were supposed to grow in, establish functioning systems in schools, hospitals, central government that would govern them within those particular areas. So they faced a bit of challenges as a government. But on top of that, also, there were internal fights within the government of the people that were in the party of President Julius Nyerere. But of course, there are also additional fights within the party. And this is not an exception, because you also seen it in National Unity Platform. Mpuga, Segona, there are several allegations of corruption within the party internal fights. And this is normal because these are just human beings. So to some extent, the Ujamaa system actually worked, because there was improvement in primary school enrollment. Adult literacy also improved, but also including life expectancy that improved at the time. But most importantly, also helped forge a sense of national unity, especially through language, because during that time, Swahili was a mandatory language to be spoken by everyone. It was a national language. So that's why you see lately a lot of Tanzanians are struggling so hard to express themselves in English, because of that Ujamaa system that was introduced by Mwalimu Julius Nyerere. But on the flip side, the system faced a lot of criticism, because people are being forced to to move from their original homesteads to these Wujama villages. So there was a lot of coercion. Additionally, there was also corruption and also external shocks such as the global recession at the time, which made it difficult for the system to self-sustain. And so, because of that, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere just decided to retire because of the pressures. He could not handle it anymore. So you should commend Bobi Wine, because this guy has really tried. He has really tried to to be in this race of politics against President Museveni, because President Museveni is a smart politician. So to really run up against him is not an easy thing to do, you know. But yeah, let's listen more to this interview and see what else he had to say.
Yeah, that's why you'll find them expecting a lot from you, even the ordinary people. I mean, I'm one of those people that we used to tell Dr. Besigye, Tulwanirire them and fight for us. We are supporting you. And, you know, the day Dr. Besigye said, no, we are not picking up guns, we are going to push the non-violent way, I was younger and I knew less. So I was angry and said, but we supported you because you're a colonel. You know, why don't we just give us guns and be that guy? So I was thinking in a certain way. Believe me, there are people, when we came out of the 2021 elections, that were disappointed. And instead of getting angry with the dictator, they were angry with me. And were like, Watulimba ugenda kuja kwa Museveni tukulonda. So we have to understand them. But there are also politicians that use it. They think that maybe you're popular among the people and that is something that doesn't make them very comfortable, and they would want to discredit you at every turn. Therefore, if the vote is rigged, it is going to be your fault, not the rigger. No wonder they blame me for my comrades that are in prison. And they're not blaming the captor. They're blaming me for my people who are being oppressed. They're not blaming the oppressor. You see them say, we are Sibisabana Babani, etc. It is tough, but like I said, understand them. Some are speaking out of an empty stomach, and others out of an empty head.
Okay. There's a picture.
Well, for me, I'll not speak out of an empty stomach or an empty head. I'll say, as we close, Bobi Wine is definitely facing a challenge of pressure from a population that is desperately in need of change. But I think, unfortunately for the population, they do not understand the ins and outs of the political game. The political game is not 1 + 2 = 3. So the political game sometimes, where you see that the answer is obvious, it's never obvious. That's why they say politics is a dirty game. So when you see Bobi Wine saying that people were actually mad at him when the 2021 election was rigged, or they did not win the election, instead of being mad at President Museveni, who it was alleged that he rigged the vote, people were mad at him. It's because people thought it was going to be an obvious game. But for a military regime that came into power using weapons and where blood was shed, for it to go out of power or out of the dancing stage, lives need to be lost. We need to pay that price, and that price has to come heavily. The abductions you see happening, the illegal arrests that are being conducted are just a tip of the iceberg. We have to pay a bigger price for the change to come. Just like the people that are ruling now paid a very huge price. They had to oust the government. They had to shed blood. There are mass graves that were created in Luweero. So it's not easy. It's not easy. This Bobi Wine is simply telling you nti change mwagala tegenda kujja mu bwangu. It's going to cost an even bigger price for us to get that change. But from where I sit, I don't think Ugandans are really ready to pay the price. I don't think there's a good number of Ugandans that are ready to pick up fire, guns or arms to go and oust the government. We are not that generation anymore. What can I say as a conclusion? When Bobi Wine says he once felt like quitting, it's not a sign of weakness, but it's a mark of every leader who carries a heavy movement on their shoulders. And the truth is, leaders don't quit when they stop believing in themselves. They quit when the pressure becomes heavier than their humanity. Yet, the greatest among them stays because the cause is bigger than their pain. I had to read that because I wrote that and I want to deliver it the way it was. Yeah. What can I say? You need to give credit to Bobi Wine. That's all I can say. Those of you judging him, saying that he's weak, or he has now started feeling a kalido, muri basiru. Bye.